Hi friends, this is Trish and welcome to Teacher Therapy. Today we're going to talk about a topic that strikes fear into the hearts of a lot of teachers, including my former self, and that is the topic of talking to parents and especially dealing with difficult parents. It doesn't take long to find out that parents can either be our greatest ally or our worst nightmare. And sometimes it only takes a few difficult interactions with parents to scare us away from discussing things with any parent for the rest of our teaching career. But I want to encourage you today that it is really important to try your best to build bridges with parents and to do your best to be honest about students' behavior with parents. But before we get to the motivational part, I definitely want to take some time validating why it is so hard sometimes to work with parents. But I won't speak for everybody. I'll just tell you how I felt as a teacher. If I could pick just one word besides thorough terror, it would be intimidation. When I started teaching, I was barely 25, and it just felt weird for me a little bit to talk to adults that sometimes were twice my age and deliver sometimes not the greatest news about how their child was behaving or performing academically. And even stranger was the times when they would actually ask me for parenting advice when I didn't have any kids myself. So for a lot of us, no matter how old we are, the prospect of dealing with kids' parents is just scary. I also felt like there was a subtle but huge pressure to make sure parents were happy. In many of the schools and the districts I taught at, parents were kind of seen as customers. And so there was a lot of pressure to really say and do things in such a way that the customer would not be upset. I also found when contacting parents, a lot of times they would kind of flip the script and they wouldn't want to discuss what was going wrong with their child's behavior. They wanted to turn it into an interrogation of me and my instructional strategies, and they wanted to take it as an opportunity to discuss all the things that they didn't like about me from the beginning of the school year to the point that I was calling them. So that was always stressful. Sometimes it kind of felt like parents had the attitude that if I was to dare call them about any kind of trouble their child was having, they would make sure to find or invent something that I was doing wrong and quote unquote get me in trouble with my boss. And for any non-teachers that happen to be listening, that might be hard to believe. We would hope that parents would be displaying maturity, but I found that on an emotional topic like somebody's child, sometimes logic goes completely out the window. The absolute hardest thing was situations where for whatever reason, the parent was convinced that I was just picking on their child and that I just didn't like their child. Those are really difficult situations because again, they're not really logical. They're going off of emotions and being offended. And so it felt kind of unproductive and like there was nothing that I could really do to make the situation better. Even more difficult than that was thankfully the rare but really difficult parents that were literally bullies. I have dealt with a handful of parents in the 8 years that I was teaching where it truly seemed like they took joy in trying to break a teacher. And the thing is, these parents tended to have histories of doing this with almost every teacher that the child had. So a lot of these parents had reputations, and sometimes if you were lucky, someone might warn you about them. But that was hard because you just kind of got the feeling that they didn't like you for no reason. And really, who knows? Maybe if I was Dr. Phil, I would look back through their past. Maybe they had a really bad interaction with a teacher and just really disliked teachers for the rest of their life. But these are the kind of situations that really kind of scare teachers from ever wanting to really deal with and work with parents again. And the truth is, at this time in history, parenting itself has changed dramatically, even from when I grew up in the 90s. It seems like both parents and their children are more anti-authority than ever before. Now, many of you guys have pointed out in other videos, that's because as a whole, we've seen a lot of leaders fail. And we've seen a lot of adults acting really poorly and they have not been good models for children. But the hard part is whatever percentage that is, whether it's 5 or 10 or even 20% of the population, there's still going to be 80% or higher of the population that are good people, that are really working hard, that are honest, that have integrity. But now we're all facing the backlash of people that did the wrong thing. I've also noticed that parents are busier than ever before. Many of the parents in the communities that I worked in had multiple jobs. And because of that, discipline at home was very inconsistent. And there was a lot of guilty parenting. And guilty parenting kind of looks like giving kids iPhones and iPads and kind of letting them do what they want, especially in school. I noticed this weird phenomena where it would seem sometimes like the kids and the parents were literally teaming up against me, and the parent was kind of acting like one of their kids' middle school friends, like, yeah, let's get the teacher. And again, my Dr. Phil guess on why this is happening is that a lot of these parents feel so guilty that they are not able to be there for their kids for whatever reason. And so they just overindulge and overprotect their kids and keep them from consequences and keep them from feeling negative in hopes that somehow everything's all going to work out. In addition to a lot of parents not really trusting teachers, a lot of them see teachers, ironically enough, as babysitters or just public servants that are paid to be quiet and smile and just deal with their children. I've also heard this sentiment a lot that many people think the job of a teacher is very easy, and they have a little bit of bitterness toward teachers for their vacations and their perceived benefit package. And so they just kind of have animosity toward teachers. Some of these things might be kind of subconscious, but kids have a tendency to repeat things that their parents say. And so it's always kind of clear when you hear some of the things that come out of students' mouths sometimes where they learn that from. So oftentimes disrespect is really being passed down from the parents to the children, and the teachers get heaping doses of disrespect. Other parents sincerely believe that it's the job of the teacher to really raise the kids, to give them morals and values and instill discipline. And a lot of people actually see teachers as miracle workers. They think their kid just shows up in the classroom. They're supposed to learn encyclopedias of information by osmosis. And so they really don't understand when the teacher is telling them that the kid needs to work on skills at home or that maybe they're behind. Their kind of idea is that, hey, you're the teacher, that's what you're paid to do. Why are you even talking to me about it? I've also noticed another kind of strange development that has taken place from the time that I was little till now. It seems like when I was growing up, adults generally knew that children have a tendency to lie and make up things and maybe even be a bit manipulative. However, now, I don't know like what's in the water, but it seems like parents these days believe everything that their kid says. And on the flip side, they actually think that teachers are the ones that are doing all the lying and the manipulating. So as you can imagine, as soon as kids realize this, it makes things really hard for the teacher. And if you pair this with the mindset that the parents believe that teachers are actually bullying their kids or singling them out or somehow picking on them just because they don't like them, it makes the situation more difficult. I'm also noticing that I've seen the worst portrayals of teachers within the last 2 years, really from 2020 and beyond, I have ever seen in my entire life. Apparently, there's a few really strange teachers on TikTok that now have come to represent all teachers. And this kind of goes back to the issue of people thinking that they understand the whole education system and what all teachers are like just based on a few teachers that have gone viral. It also doesn't help that all education issues are incredibly political, again, from 2020 till now. So even if you have nothing to do with the decision making, if you're given a rule from your district and you are needing to enforce it, then you might have half the parents celebrating and half the parents super upset. And finally, one of the saddest things that I've seen is a lot of parents literally don't know what to do with their kids. I have had parents tearfully tell me, I don't know what to do about my child and their behavior. I don't know how to help you. I don't know how to help them. I don't know what to do. And so a lot of parents, I think, are really feeling just hopeless. So all of these factors come into play when we're dealing with parents. And I just wanted to validate all of those things before I got to the practical tips, because when I was a teacher, nothing was more irritating than having somebody give me tips and tricks without actually acknowledging the reality of how hard they were and what I was actually facing. So with all of that said, you would probably think that my number one piece of advice would just be run for the hills from parents, but no, that's not my advice. I think you actually need to do everything in your their power to be on the same team as parents, to have good relationships with them, and even if it starts out rocky, to reassure them and let them know that you want to help their child and that you actually care about their child. We've got to have grace with parents just like we want parents to have grace with us as teachers. And the truth is, a lot of times when parents get negative phone calls about their kid, they are feeling defensive, they're feeling humiliated and embarrassed. Sometimes they're feeling attacked, like their own parenting skills aren't up to par, so they seek to go on the defensive and attack back. And many times parents are simply feeling fearful because they feel like they've lost control of so much in their life, even sometimes paying the bills, and then they're feeling the additional burden of hearing all of the different ways that their child is falling short. So even though it's going to be our tendency to maybe enter into conversations and match the parents' defensiveness, we want to make sure that we're constantly having an attitude of grace toward them, because we don't know what they're going through. We don't know what their life story has been. And there's always a reason for why people are the way they are, even if we don't understand it. So now I want to give you guys a bunch of different tips to help you in your interactions with parents, whether it's parent-teacher conference time or whether you're just needing to call a kid's parent that's acting up. Make sure you stay tuned. And of course, let me know in the comments what tips and tricks that you have found helpful with working with parents. And if you are a parent, we would love to hear from you guys too. So the number one thing that you want to think about when you are communicating with parents in any way, shape, or form is you want to be mindful of your tone, your body language, your demeanor, and you want to do your best to sound kind and loving. And you want your attitude to demonstrate humility. Your vocal tone, your facial expressions, you want to communicate that you are on the same side as the parent, that you want what's best for their child, that you believe it's possible for their child to change, that you see some kind of good in their child, and that in spite of everything that's going on, you actually enjoy your job as their teacher. Attitude, tone, and demeanor does so much to de-escalate difficult situations. And I even had a parent that was being horrible to me. I'm talking horrible to me. Stop in the middle of one of her mini rants and say, "You're handling this really well." And I thought it was kind of ridiculous, but it took a little while, but that parent ended up actually being on my team eventually. So no matter how angry or frustrated you are, you want to remember that parents are an alliance that you want. I'm sure most of us have heard of the sandwich method, but if you can, you want to try to bring up anything positive in the beginning that you possibly can. It could be a recent performance on a test, a kind gesture that they did to a student, an improvement or a growth that you've seen, or even something as simple as, it's really such a delight having little Billy in class. He's always making us laugh and he has the brightest attitude I've ever seen. You want to kind of soften the blow of whatever bad news you might have to share. Once it's time to get into any negative information that you have to share, you want to be specific and you want to be objective and you want to try to be concise. So instead of saying something like, "Little Billy never stops talking, he's interrupting everybody all the time, he's getting into arguments with other kids, he won't share with anybody, he threw cafeteria food at the second grade teacher's face, oh, and he's failing all of his spelling tests." That would be a little bit hard to take in. So you might have to kind of start issue by issue instead of mingling them all together in a giant pile. You want to try to take out any emotional or judging words out of the conversation as best as you can and just state facts. So instead of saying "Little Billy is constantly rude to everyone," you would want to be really specific and say, today during reading time, Little Billy said that Margaret's face looked like a dumpster fire and Margaret cried. So you're being specific, you're being objective, and you're leaving judgment words out. Leave those kind of, things for the parent to figure out themselves. When you're specific, it often makes it easier for the parents to take in the information, but the more like anger or judgment they're feeling from you, the more their defenses are going to rise. So the more neutral you can stay, the better. I'd also recommend giving an out if you can. A lot of times when I talk to parents, I would say things like, maybe they didn't realize that would be hurtful, but I wanted to let you know what happened so that you could have a conversation with them. That way, you're not saying that Little Billy is a future sociopath. You are giving them the benefit of the doubt that maybe they didn't know and they just need a little bit of help. Another way to demonstrate humility is to ask the parent for help. So you could ask for help and advice and how you can better work with a child. You can say things like, "Do you have any suggestions that work well at home?" Or you can even ask, if you dare, has he had teachers before before that he got along well with? Can you give me any tips or ideas? As annoying as this might feel to say this, the parent will be really honored that you are willing to take their advice. Because sometimes I've been told that, parents feel here and they feel like the teachers are here, like hovering over them. And so by giving them a feeling that they have something wise to share with you, it could be a game changer. And of course, you can ask for their help and support at home with whatever is going on in the classroom. It really depends on the parent. You can feel it out, but there's been times where I've actually asked parents like, hey, if they're doing well, can you give them a reward at home or a consequence? And there are some parents that would be really willing to work with you that way. I've also had parents say absolutely not to my face. So it really probably be able to tell what kind of parent you're dealing with as you first talk to them. You also want to convey in your tone a sense of empathy and the fact that you understand that this is hard to hear and that it's a difficult situation. I can't think of another describing word besides apologetic, although I'm sure that's not the best word, but it's just this tone that I know this is really hard. I know that this is difficult. We're in this together. We both want what's best for your child and we're going to get through this. Again, it's this idea of partnership and teamwork rather than you having an attitude that says your child is a loser and you need to fix them before tomorrow. I've also found that it's helpful to offer to follow up, but you can ask the parent if they want that. Say, would you like me to follow up with you in a week and let you know how things are going? A lot of times, if a student knows that you're in contact with their parents, they will kind of straighten up their life at least a little bit. I've also found that it really helps if we can link a student's behavior with an outcome and with their future when talking to parents. So for example, instead of saying, little Billy won't stop talking and it's ruining my lessons, you can say, I'm noticing that Billy is calling out and having side conversations frequently during the writing lessons, and he's missing really important information that's going to help him be successful on his writing exam or the end of the year tests, or just as a student in general. If your school still gives grades these days, you can also mention how behavior is impacting their academic performance. You want to try as much as you can to make the conversation not about you and how much it's annoying you and how it's impacting the child in their future. A lot of times a parent may not feel bad for you and your plight as a teacher at all, but if they can really get a vision of how their child's behavior and actions is hurting themselves in the future, that can help things a lot. If for some reason, after you putting into place all these tips, if the parent is still being difficult and they're being obstinate or they're being insulting, you want to have some kind of gentle exit strategy. You can just thank them for their time, thank them for listening to your concerns, possibly offer a suggestion, and you can offer to follow up with them in a week. But if a conversation ever crosses the line and it's being blown totally out of the water, you can simply say something like, it sounds like this is not a great time to have this discussion. I hope we can reschedule and talk about this issue at a further date at your convenience. Have a great day. And then goodbye. With really, truly difficult parents, you want to insist that your administrators are present. It's both protection for you and accountability for the parent. Now, what happens if you absolutely cannot get a hold of a parent, meaning that really they're seeing your calls and they are not answering the phone? This happens all the time. I have been known to send text messages, emails, and even letters to the house. You can have other people call, such as the counselor or maybe even an administrator. If you're ridiculous, you can call from a different phone number and catch them. But in serious situations, I have actually contacted emergency contacts and just said something like, I'm really trying to reach Billy's mom and I'm not able to. Can you please reach out to her and let her know that I would like to talk to her at her earliest convenience? And typically, as soon as I called somebody else on that long list of contacts, I would usually go ahead and hear from the parents at that point. In spite of all of the drama that comes with sometimes working with parents, reaching out to parents, I still think that if you can somehow get on an okay basis with the parents, that is going to be your best help for managing classroom behavior that is not responding to your classroom management plan. As I've talked about in a lot of different videos, in so many schools today, teachers can do pretty much next to nothing to control student behavior. And so when you can really work with parents and have a good relationship with them, parents can do a lot more than you can do. And I would say 80% of students absolutely did not want to get any kind of negative phone call home. I would encourage you to try and reach out to parents, even if you kind of had an interesting initial impression. I'm just speaking for myself. After being kind of traumatized by so many mean parents, I kind of stopped wanting to deal with all parents, but that wasn't right on my part. And I actually cut myself off from my greatest source of help. So I would just recommend to you to keep trying, unless it's truly a toxic, crazy situation, which that could be its own video. One more thing I'll mention is that telling the truth, no matter how gently, to a parent takes a lot of courage. Unfortunately, because of today's educational climate and all the craziness, a lot of teachers are not completely honest with parents about their child's behavioral problems or their academic problems. And so you might be the first teacher to actually tell a parent the truth about what you're seeing. And maybe it'll take 2 more teachers telling that parent that exact same thing for the parent to take it seriously, that they really need to get help for their child and help their child themselves in a way that only they can do as a parent. So don't be surprised whether it is true or not. Don't be surprised if you hear from parents, oh, I've never heard this from any other teacher before. All the teachers have said that my child is amazing. Well, it's kind of possible that they did because they were afraid. So you might have to be the courageous one, but your act of courage could end up saving someone's life one day. You just never know. So be bold, be brave, be strong, make those parent contacts, and above all, keep the high ground, be kind, be humble, even if a parent is not being so nice to you. I have 2 resources to totally recommend to you. One's old school, one's new school. The old school one is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. That one's a classic. I would definitely recommend that one for learning how to work with parents. The new school one is something called Verbal Judo. It is so cool. Maybe I can do some other videos on that in the future and how it relates to the classroom, but there's even other videos on it all over YouTube, so I'd highly recommend that. If you feel like you struggle with working with people and talking to people, or if you feel like, hey, I'm doing everything I can to be kind, yet I keep getting in confrontations, there might be some small things you can tweak from those resources. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was helpful, and I love to hear from you guys in the comments, and always let me know if there's any video ideas that you would like to see. I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye for now.